I am blessed to have so many wonderful memories of growing up in the way of Jesus. When I was in the youth group at Perry Hall United Methodist Church, there were a lot of people who helped me in these early days of my faith journey. We used to do different games and activities, and this one might be familiar to some of you. It's called a trust walk. Has anybody ever done that? You walked with another person, and each person took turns leading the other on a walk. Typically, the one who was following was blindfolded and had to follow the voice of the one who was leading. Sometimes you would hold hands or place your hands lightly on someone else's shoulder, but sometimes you went just by the voice command. It could be a challenge to follow depending on who was leading you and the trust you placed in them to keep you safe. Now, this exercise is intended to remind you of the relationship that we have with God and to be able to examine your ability to place your trust in God to lead you in life. I look back on that, and little did I know as a teenager that this would become one of the most important lessons for me in following Jesus. Trusting God to care for me and lead me in the way of abundant and everlasting life. So one of the major themes of Psalm 23 is trusting God to lead us in the same way that a shepherd leads sheep. This is a lifelong process for us, learning to trust God. Last week, we began our meditation on Psalm 23 from the perspective of a sheep in God's fold. Or maybe I should say flock. Purple flock. I just couldn't resist that. But our theme was learning to follow. And I mentioned then that following requires trust. And trust is necessary for us to follow. So the two things are interrelated. And both continue to grow and deepen as we grow in our efforts in striving to follow God. The psalm begins, "The Lord is my shepherd." And in the first 3 verses of Psalm 23, we have this beautiful picture of how God as our shepherd leads us and cares for us. A shepherd leads his or her flock with the number one priority of the flock's well-being. And sheep are content with all that the shepherd provides. And yet, troubles still arise. Enemies threaten, and we may begin to doubt. There are dark valleys. When we are honest with ourselves, we know that sometimes we can have an unrealistic expectation that nothing bad should happen to us because we belong to God's flock. This quote is from the book Jesus Calling by Sarah Young. And I really want you to open yourself to receive this challenge. Give up the illusion that you deserve a problem-free life. Problems come to all of us. And yet, God is with us. No matter what happens, we remain in God's care. This is where we draw strength from God's promises and our faith. no matter how faltering our faith may feel. But with verse 4, Psalm 23 takes a new tone. In the first 3 verses, God is referred to in the third person. And now, God is addressed in that personal way. You and yours. There's a closeness with this choice of words, this relationship between the shepherd God and the flock. And friends, this is where trust is essential. Even when we cannot understand, especially when we cannot comprehend the vastness and the reliability of God's care for us. Trust. David, to whom this psalm is attributed, knew what it meant to live with enemies. The danger was real for him, and he experiences this darkest valley. And David walks through the valley with God as his shepherd. Now, there are other psalms, others attributed to David, where he addresses the need to trust in God. Here's a quick example from Psalm 56, verse 3. And this is a more modern translation. But even when I am afraid, I keep trusting you. I want you to know that I'm adding that verse to my notebook that I'm preparing for my surgery. And I want to take a quick moment to thank you all who have sent me some of your favorite scriptures. And I have prepared a notebook. So if you want to send something to me, email me one of your favorite verses or write it down for me, type it. Do people still type on a typewriter? But just send it to me, and I'll have it. I also want to share with you this gem of wisdom from Proverbs chapter 3. Trust in God with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding. And this morning when I had my morning coffee, I drank from a mug that had this verse on it. Trust in God with all your heart. It is a challenge for us to trust in God. And I know for myself, it's so easy to allow those other thoughts in my head to distract me from following our shepherd. We must stay close to our shepherd and allow God's rod and staff to protect us. The only way you can get to the top of a mountain is to go through the valley, right? If you were going to be hiking, you have to go through the valley. And so that is true for us in our journey of faith. We must remember that the Good Shepherd always goes before the flock. And the Good Shepherd prepares everything in advance. Friends, Jesus has gone before us and faced every trial that we can face. And Jesus has conquered every foe and every fear that we can have. Stay close and follow. Our Good Shepherd prepares a table for us. In our study book, A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by Phillip Keller, we learn that this verse refers to the time of year in the journey when the sheep are approaching the high mountain country. In some areas of sheep country, these high plateaus of the sheep ranges are referred to as a mesa, which is the Spanish word for table. Now you can put that together, right? So before the shepherd leads the flock up the mountains, he will go ahead and prepare the way, surveying and making it ready for the sheep, so that when they get there, all is prepared. Our faith journey in following and trusting Jesus leads us to a mountaintop experience. It's what Keller calls a tableland trip. Right? We're going to go to the table, the highest point. And we can find blessing even as there are things threatening us. Nothing can take away the blessing of the abundant life we have in God's flock. But this is our trust in action. The good news is it doesn't have to be perfect trust. So don't be too hard on yourself. And we never have to do it alone. We have our flock. And we have our shepherd who never, ever leaves us. And then our shepherd hosts us at the table, anoints or bathes our heads with oil. And because of this, our cup is so full that it spills over. The psalm is written to portray an entire year of the sheep following the shepherd. So we've come to the end of the cycle. But I want us to return to our opening statement of faith. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. We experience moment by moment the unrelenting love and grace of our God. The slide will show you a quote from Bob Holmes talking about abiding in God's care. Rest. Can you allow yourselves to feel that? To live and work and engage life from a place of rest. That is a state of grace. That's what it means to abide. It's how we are to live. We're hardwired for stillness, but we've forgotten. So I say this as much to myself as to all of you. Take time to be still, to let go, and to trust God, and abide in God's care and love. And so we have journeyed through grassy meadows to restful waters, and all through proper paths. Even through the darkest valley we have gone in order to reach the highest peak, all the while following our shepherd and trusting. And now after this year of journeying, the shepherd leads the sheep back to their home ranch. And likewise, our concluding verse brings us to our eternal home. Yes, goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, I want to talk for a minute about King David. And some of you may have studied this about David, that he had a strong desire to build a home for God, a place where God's presence could dwell in a special way, a temple. Did David ever build a temple for God? No. Do you know who built the temple in those days? It was Solomon, right? David's son. As much as David wanted to do this, it was not God's desire for David to be the one to do it, to build a physical temple. And yet it was from David that God built generations of faithful covenant people. And so David's purpose was to be the leader of a people who lived in covenant relationship with God. And so for me, when I hear this, I think about the house of God as the very presence of God. I will live in the Lord's house as long as I live. Our home is living as a part of God's flock. This is our forever home. For the sheep, the shepherd brings them back home to the ranch where they had begun their journey. And they dwell in the care of their shepherd forever. In like manner, we live in the care of the very presence of our shepherd God, now and forever. Amen.